On today's The Signals podcast, we have Andy Shean, the Chief Learning Officer at Penn Foster University. Hey, Andrew, thanks for being here.
Hey, Laura, I'm excited to be here. Let's go.
You sound like, you know what? I was so surprised that today is August. It's August 4th. And you just sound like back to school. Is that what it feels like at Penn Foster? Does it feel like the beginning of the school year? Although you guys are always running programs. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we never stop. But I will say that we have like surges in the year, and like back to school for our high school is definitely a surge. So there's a sense that this is like a big moment for us, but we're year round.
Okay, so there is a sense that it's a big moment. And you just mentioned something that I don't think everyone knows about Penn Foster. So you have a high school, you have associate's degrees and full-fledged bachelor's, and then you also have like career learning. Is that right?
It is. Yeah, Penn Foster is huge. So there's 300,000 students that span across career, college, and high school. I'd say high school is probably our flagship. You could argue we're one, if not the largest online high school in the country. And I'd say like something that's really interesting about Penn Foster too is we're kind of pride ourselves in being radically affordable. So there's no Title IV loans.
Oh, wow.
Students 99.99% of the time graduate with zero debt. And we are super career aligned. So even in our high school, you can go to our high school and graduate and go to like a post-secondary if that's your path. But if a lot of our students are interested in more like career workforce pathways, and then it's obviously true of our college and career. So one of the things outside of radical affordability we're really proud of is like we want to get you economic ROI like day one. So a lot of our programs are direct to career aligned. So vet tech, farm tech, medical billing and coding, dental assistant, like it's very much career focused.
Okay, you just said so many things that I want to dig on. And you're right about the pet vet. I was actually looking through your career focus this weekend and I was like, oh, a pet grooming. I might go get, I don't know why I thought I would do that, but like it is, you have the full gamut of things that people could be learning and getting degrees and certifications in and really changing their career. But you just said 300,000 students. You have 300,000. They're all online and that's currently enrolled or that's over time?
That's currently enrolled. But just so you said pet grooming, I just have to I'm like a total nerd.
Tell me.
And whenever I hear that, all I can think of is Dumb and Dumber and them like taking the animals around in the back of Lloyd's truck. That's like literally looks like a dog. I mean, I know if you're out there and you're pet grooming, especially if you're taking Penn, like much respect, but the 13-year-old in me thinks of that. 300,000 students. Currently, I mean, you could argue that it could fluctuate a little bit if you sort of get into like actively enrolled. But yeah, I mean, we are a very large organization that I think until recently, a lot of people haven't heard a ton about. I know I didn't when I joined 4 years ago, which by the way is like part of me being excited about being on this podcast. And part of like my goal this year, especially, is to get out there and to shine a light externally on the Penn Foster group, just to talk about the cool things we're doing. And also because I think we have a lot to share. We want to be a thought leader in the space.
Okay, let's talk about something cool you're doing that you just mentioned, radical affordability. I feel like online learning is the wild, wild west. Things are either $1 million or nothing or whatever, Talk to me a little bit about how Penn Foster thinks about radical affordability.
Well, just like on a personal level, let me start there and then I'll talk about Penn Foster University. Like on a personal level, I really became obsessed with online learning way back in the day when Disrupting Class by Christensen and Horn came out.
Yeah.
And part of that early premise was that you were going to appeal to the non-consumer. And what I thought a lot about is the consumer that can't afford, right, a higher education. And that online would sort of be an opportunity, a knock down the door for the less fortunate. And then, the theory of Christensen and disruptive innovation is that eventually it would get better and better and it would sort of surpass traditional education. What I would sort of argue we're kind of in one of those potential moments,
wow,
which we'll talk about later. But that's how I thought of it. And then like along my journey, what I found out is that actually increasingly wasn't the case. And that online education was becoming really expensive. And it wasn't necessarily like this radical, affordable, disruptive force. And in many cases, people were graduating longer with just as much debt as the traditional. So it's like, what are we What's the disruption? Now, like, I still get that you can provide like accessible education 24/7 and for working adults and people who have kids and to be able to not have to go to a brick and mortar. Like, yeah, like there's a differentiator there. So I'm not trying to completely knock it. I'm just saying in terms of affordability, I think 95% of the space missed the mark.
Yeah.
So when I heard about Penn Foster Group and I heard that they don't do Title IV loans and that a lot of it is either tuition benefits, we partner with, some of your biggest Fortune 500 companies, Walmart, Target, Pepsi, Ford. I mean, you name it. We're probably a tuition benefits partner with them. So that's one key angle, right? You're working and earning and learning.
Right.
And then the other is like our B2C is most people pay out of pocket because it's so affordable. You're talking about a couple $1,000s,
right,
for a degree. You're not talking about like $10,000 a year. You're talking about a couple $1,000s, period.
Wow.
So that's how we'd order to find radical affordability, right? Like you can pay monthly or you can use a tuition benefits program. And our hope is that when you graduate, you have zero debt, and day one on your new job, you are, economically improving your situation. And there's a huge ROI. So that's, I mean, we probably could define it 1,000 different ways, but like fundamental how we think about it.
Well, and it's interesting what you said about how online learning had this potential and then missed the mark. I read an NPR article this year that said, on average, universities that have in-person and an online are charging $12 more per unit for online learning, that you're paying for the opportunity to take it from home for that convenience you talked about. And so this thing that could have radically changed the way we looked at funding for higher ed actually almost made it worse in some cases.
It totally did. And listen, like, so, I mean, I grew up in scaled online learning. And so like, I have so much love for the people in the space. So I'm not trying to just throw shade. There's a lot of good things, right? But just to be provocative, so many people focused on marketing and enrollment, which increasingly got super expensive as like Google search and the other ways like you optimize your marketing funnel. And those costs like skyrocket. People didn't focus enough on quality, in my opinion. And I think honestly, if we're being honest, a lot of online programs boomed because they were viewed as a cash cow for a lot of the space. I really believe that there's market changers out there right now, and I believe Penn Foster is one of them, that are thinking about it differently. We're thinking about it in a way like the old school, like Christensen disrupting class was thinking about it. Like, what if we can really change the storyline? What if you do have enough people promoting you because you really are truly affordable and you really do land a career, and that the incredible expense of marketing sort of like lessons, and you can reinvest that money in the quality of the experience and your sort of outcomes start like that. That's like the market changer that I know we aspire to be, and I hope others do too, because you're right. Like, so many programs are just as expensive, if not more. And I don't get it. What was the disruptive innovation that was supposed to happen? Like, kind of missed it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk about something else where higher ed sometimes gets called out for missing the marks that you keep mentioning, which is being career focused. So you end up with this degree. I just read this statistic, something like 60% of people over 23 are not currently in a job associated with their degree, right? There wasn't a job there for them. There was no quick line. And you said to me that Penn Foster is career focused. What is that? How does that look different? How are you disrupting that space?
So there's a couple of things. One is, which has been a real passion of mine early days, even as a professor of education, is I really think we have to rethink general education.
Okay.
And I know that can be controversial for some. And listen, like if you're 18 to 22 years old and you're going to college, and part of the goal is to like expand your mind and your horizons and expose yourself and become like a holistic person thinker, like there's goodness to that. Like there is. But you have the majority of students are going back to school, not 18 to 22-year-old and not living on a residential campus. And they need a better, faster, cheaper pathway to employment, which means you have to rethink general education. So, I think like that's number one. Number two is you have to question degrees that don't have a clear career alignment. I mean, how many like degrees do you see people going and spending $90,000 a year for, where it's very unclear what the job is at the end of it? Now, listen, like people who get degrees in English and people who get degrees in creative arts, I mean, sometimes those people end up being some of the most fantastic professionals, but sometimes it's in like product management, you know? And so I think we have to get more serious about direct career alignment and rethinking general education. And I would say that's true of Penn Foster Group. We still believe in the ethos of general education, right? Which is skills that transcend, or durable skills, critical thinking, AI literacy, digital literacy, like that stuff still matters. But if you can weave that within the direct context of application and the actual job you want, that's a big deal. So take vet tech. Why not learn AI literacy through actually applying AI literacy skills in the context of a veterinary technician? I think, one, it's direct, authentic, situated learning, which is like the gold standard of learning. And two, it's a way to like embed those durable skills, those general education ethos directly into the career curriculum itself. So it's like win-win. So, I mean, I think in terms of like the broader space, I think we're long overdue to like rethink general education, especially for adult learners. And two, I think you have to actually question some of the degrees we offer and get more serious about direct alignment between degrees that are in demand jobs, right? So when you graduate, there's actually something on the other side.
Okay, I want to ask about that, but I want to go back a little bit too. So for really quickly at the beginning, you were talking about how most of online learners, most degree seekers are not high school seniors. Like a lot of four-year universities are all fighting over the 3 million kids who graduate high school this upcoming year. But there's like 60 million? What number would you say that is of adults who are trying to get a degree, upskill, something like that?
I don't know the number. I should, but I do believe that like the pendulum has swung, and that the majority, I know it's true of online learning,
right?
But I would say even in general, I would say there is now a larger percentage of, call it, non-traditional learners in the educational pipeline, especially post-secondary,
right?
Than there are traditional learners. And that's a big deal. And it should cause us to like reimagine pathways for different types of outcomes that students have.
Exactly. Well, so I want to talk about those adult learners, because what you talked about was changing general ed. And I think what you're telling me is those basic classes that we make every freshman take, like, really aren't applicable to these adults who have been in the workforce, who have families, often, like, they've learned some of that stuff, right? And instead of throwing them into those courses, why not find ways to do those courses in the job they're trying to seek? Does that sound about right?
It does, but I even go a step further.
Oh, tell me.
So if you're a non-STEM major, why do you need to take college algebra as one of your general education courses? I mean, we need to like completely throw out all these requirements and get like the smartest people in the world to come back together and like reimagine it for different paths. Yeah, if like you're in STEM and you want to be an engineer or an astronaut or scientist, you should take college algebra. But if you're non-STEM, why do you need it? Tell me when the last time you used college algebra in a non-STEM major is. And I know that's a provocative thing to say, but it's arguably still the most failed college course. And I would argue a large percentage of people don't even need to take it. I have this debate with my best friend all the time, who's a data science professor at Southern Methodist University. And he's like, well, Andy, you don't just learn college algebra, you learn critical thinking. I'm like, you can learn critical thinking through a lot of other things than like polynomials.
Right.
So I think it's 100% what you said, which I think is like the real most important takeaway, which is if you can take durable skills, let's use critical thinking, and you can apply it directly within the context of the career a student wants to have. Let's use vet tech since we've used that, right? And just imagine you're a veterinary technician and you're dealing with an issue and you don't know exactly what to do. You should go seek multiple perspectives, like a good critical thinker would do. And you should examine your own bias in interpreting those perspectives. So you can learn a durable skill, which has value, the ethos of general education, but you should do it within a context, situated, authentic learning, like the vet tech example, that you can see the relevance of, as opposed to learning it as like some kind of abstract concept that you don't see the bridge, you don't see the relevancy. Like we missed the mark on that big time. But yeah, I mean, like the typical, I know this because my cousin is going to TCU this year, which by the way is a great school.
Right.
But I looked at her second semester classes. there's a lot of them that like you should really question. And TCU is a really expensive school. Why you're paying for that many of those types of general education classes, like a history of musical theater was one of the general education requirements. Listen, has an elective, by all means, take that course. If you're fascinated and you love learning, take that course. But a requirement for a 4-year degree, like, I mean, I just think we have to really reconsider general education, especially for your non-traditional learner.
Well, and I mean, just thinking about what you just said, right? Like, if algebra is the biggest barrier to people getting the credential, the degree that they want, and it's not going to be something they use. Oh my God, the musical one is even worse if that's going to be your barrier, right? Let me ask you this. Is there any class that you think everyone should take before they have a degree?
I do. And it sort of changes. I would say, and I know my favorite doctoral professor would like throw rotten vegetables at me, hear me say this, but I think like the one for me that is universal is in fact critical thinking. Now, I think that class should be contextualized and relative application of critical thinking, like we talked about the career example. But I think if you sort of like, what's the mark of a great education outside of like career and economic mobility? I think it's the ability to think well. And I think honestly, if you look at some of like the great educational philosophers, like, I don't know, John Dewey and Democracy and Education. I mean, he's even talking about like the foundation of a good democracy is in people's ability to like think well. So it even goes beyond direct career. I think like critical thinking is universal. In terms of the importance and what I think is like the mark of a great education. And if I had to like add one to it, it's AI literacy.
Right now, yeah, at least.
I just think like I think we missed the mark with digital literacy. I still think 90% of students still have no idea like what really goes on behind like a Google search. That's just like one example. They don't get that most of those things that pop up are paid. Right? And so
it's like they go together, this digital literacy, AI literacy, and critical thinking, like being able to think through.
So much of digital literacy and so much, I think, of AI literacy is understanding what's behind the veil and having some level of like discernment with curiosity. Like that's a big part of it. 100%. Yeah, you're right. Those three really do. Those really could go together.
That's awesome. And at Penn Foster, are you requiring AI? Let's just use AI literacy as an example. Are you requiring AI literacy for every learner?
We're going to.
Okay.
So we literally got out of the meeting on Friday with like our core leadership team, and we're coming up with like creative ways which we're going to implement AI literacy. One is to integrate it more into our current digital literacy in high school. So it'll be a major part of digital literacy. One is to include it in information literacy, which is a course in college that a lot of our students need to take. But like you and I are talking, one of like the big concerns was like, first of all, this thing is moving every day.
So fast.
You have to like constantly update it. But even more so, we don't want students to just take it in isolation. We want them to see like specific use cases for it. So on one hand, it might be like using AI as like a tutor or a pacing guide or like a way to like self-regulate, support learning. We think that's more universal. But then like the examples you and I are talking about in general education, we also want students to see it directly applicable in their job. And just to give you like a wild example, we do program reviews for all of our programs every couple years. And we actually offer a certificate gosh, I'm forgetting the name. Like somebody who's administrative assistant. Sorry.
Yeah.
And like I was looking like the old curriculum, and it was fax machine.
No.
Yeah. And so you probably no longer need to know about a fax machine. You probably need to know how to use like AI tools to be a more effective, efficient administrative assistant. And I think that's a great way then to like take something like a direct way in which you're going to use AI on your job.
Right.
Silly example, but administrative assistant. And then learn AI literacy through that, right? As opposed to just learning it in isolation.
No, I think that makes total sense. But I want to ask about this high school class that you're now offering for your high school students, because I'll tell you, I used to be a middle school leader, and the school I used to lead came to me recently, and because they know I've been working in AI for the last 5 years, and they were like, we have to do a course, and we don't know what to do. Like, we're sitting here telling our students, like, don't cheat on writing your papers, and also understand this concept of how to use AI and how this all works. Like, what do we do? Are all of your online courses available to anyone?
Well, for
for a fee.
yeah, but like I mean, it really is super affordable. But yeah. So I mean, I could imagine one of our more popular courses will be when we finish that digital lit course with a very meaty AI literacy component to it. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, like Laura, seriously, like sometimes I still will get calls from people like back in the day, like yourself, leading a middle school or leading a high school, who are like, look, like we literally can't
teach this class. Yes.
Computer science. Can you offer that for us? And so we definitely had a fairly healthy part of our business is offering single courses to providers.
I think that's huge. I know at one point I did a study with California, and they somehow found a number that 360,000 students who were qualified to be taking AP courses had no access because there was just no one to teach it, or there weren't enough kids in their particular area that needed it that was worth staffing. And so this idea of online, this is something that I think is definitely getting disrupted, is this idea of access for high school students through online learning, which I think is really powerful. I want to ask one more thing about our adult learner, our pet groomer, soon to be vet tech, possibly me with a dog covered car. Are you giving credit for work experience? So if I've been, for example, a dog groomer for the last 3 years, but I want to go become a pet vet, or a vet tech, I've got some like experience, right? I've worked with dogs. Something about that. Is some of that transferring at Penn Foster or not really? Because I know that's another piece of higher ed that's pretty rough.
Yeah, 100%. So when I first joined Penn Foster, like one of the big areas that I tackled was policy.
Okay.
So in terms of like credit transfer, prior learning experience, like this was a big area for us. I mean, and the research is really clear. Like the more, it's like kind of rocket science, but like the more credits students transfer in, the direct correlation with improved retention rates. And it makes sense, right? Because it sort of costs less, takes less time.
Right.
So I'd say to your question, like yes and no. Yes, meaning like what I've sort of challenged our team with is compassionate policies with integrity.
Oh.
So what that means is give students as much credit as you possibly can. The integrity part, though, is like our degree has to really still mean something, and we have to have some way of like verifying that, like, yes, you had these experiences, but we need to make sure that you actually like brought the skill set with you, so that when we like say you're ready for this job, like it really has merit. So there is a process that we've undertaken to do just that. And again, like we want to give you, we are focused on giving you as many possible prior learning experiences and credits as we humanly can. We just want to make sure there's integrity in the process. That's one. And then two is, and she mentioned vet tech, we're a nationally accredited, and then we have specialized accreditations for certain programs. Vet tech has a national accreditation and a specialized accreditation. The AVMA is what is the specialized accreditation for vet tech. And they have very rigorous standards about the amount of credits that you can transfer in and the work experience you can transfer in, which is a challenge because 70% of our vet tech students are actually in the field working in the space. So I am sure that they wish that they could bring more experience credits in. But in that case, we actually have an accreditor that has specific standards we have to uphold.
I'm sorry. My mind is like, just went crazy because 70% of the people who are getting certified in vet tech, who would probably be getting a ton of debt doing it anywhere else, are getting the opportunity to build up in the career they're already like on the path for because of, I mean, I'm sure that is something that just like makes your heart explode. But is there one thing at Penn? I mean, it just sounds like you've done so many different things at Penn Foster that you're most proud of.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the vet tech example is a testament to our B2B team, right? I mean, we are Petco, Bain, like you name it, we are their B2B partner. And so, and I'm sure you know, like there is a huge shortage of veterinary technicians. So there's a bunch of wins there. If like the thing that I'm most proud of, is actually what we developed maybe a year and a half ago called LADS, which is, every educator loves a good acronym, which by the way, that can also spell salad. Should probably put down with that. But LADS is, we created it in a design lab, and it was based on a challenge from our new CEO, Kermit, who's a rock star CEO, and said, listen, like my mandate as a CEO, which is now your mandate, Andy, is I want to double the completion rates. We're like, okay, this is amazing. This is a great mandate from a new CEO. How are we going to do that? And so we kind of created a quasi design lab, and a handful of us who've been in the education online space for 15, 20 years. We have doctorates in curriculum and the learning sciences, like spent a lot of time together, and we cooked up what we now call the LADS model. And it really started, it's funny, we talked a little bit in the beginning about like kind of the failures of some of like scaled online learning. We originally talked about it like, what if we were as good as our commercials? Like you think of like online commercials, like they make you want to go, they think you're going to like transport to like digital utopia when you log in. But it's not that. It's like long scrolling text and like multiple choice quizzes and like canned lectures. It's not transformational learning. And so that was like our original idea. Okay, what if we were as good as the commercial? And so we said, okay, well, what is great learning? And that's where we came up with the LADS model, which is, it stands for, the L is learner-centered, the A is for authentic, so situated, authentic application of learning, which we've talked a little bit about. The second A is for active. So much of learning in general, and especially online learning, is very passive. It's very sit and get, and we know students learn best by doing. So active. And then the D is differentiated. We know that learners come to us at all different levels with all different types of learning desires and preferences, and we need to differentiate the experience for them. And then finally, it's skill-based. We talked a lot about this in the context of general education. Like students need to see their learning incredibly relevant to the actual job that they seek. And when there's, relevancy in the learning, students are a lot more engaged. So the S is skill-based. So that's the LADS model. And we've done pilots and we've done research grants and we've published white papers and recently a peer-reviewed paper. And basically there's real efficacy with that model. And so I would say like the last year, we have been scaling the LADS across our top verticals. And so I'm proud of a lot at Penn Foster, but I'm probably most proud of a learning online content model that has efficacy associated with it that we're going big on.
How close are you to doubling your persistence rates?
So we were on this like 5-year journey.
Okay.
But last year, overall across the Penn Foster group, I believe we had a 12% increase year over year in completions, which is huge. I believe we're 1 percentage point ahead of plan this year, which I think is 14%. And so we're on the journey to doubling the completions. And by the way, in the LADS courses that we've done, I think we've done 10 to 12-ish so far. The average completion is anywhere from 14 to 17%. So we know that there's more beyond just the LADS that we need to do to take the student experience to the double the completion zone. But this is absolutely a huge foundation. And I think it's setting us on a path to achieve it.
I spent a lot of time talking about online learning persistence rates and success rates, and I will tell you a 12 to 14% increase is like unheard of. So that's incredibly impressive. And I do think your model sounds hard and intricate, to be totally honest. Like there's a lot of things in that as someone who's worked in education for a long time, but probably, but really strong to your point towards efficacy and actually like doing the right things for learners. You mentioned that you've been in this space for a long time. And I'm curious, like, how did you end up in online learning? How do you, what drives you in this space?
Yeah, so I started as a high school continuation teacher. I taught English. The school is called Abraxas. It literally means second chance. And that's kind of what I always wanted to do. I always like envisioned myself being a continuation teacher. And my heart is actually still kind of there. And I just gotten my doctorate. I had like a Save the World complex. And I told this story a couple times, but I'll never forget standing in front of those students and realizing I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. This was like very scary. And my principal at the time, who to this day is like a great friend, he's like, you need to go hang out with Ken Olino. And so he gave me this mentor teacher, Ken Olino. And it like the only way to describe Ken is like think Robin Williams from Dead Poets Society. He was like jumping off of tables. He had like a megaphone. But for an hour every day, like kids who came from like really hard home lives a lot of the time, like felt good about themselves. So we called his classroom the Oasis of Hope. So I tell that story because like my heart is still some way like there.
Yeah.
But as a young teacher who had gotten a doctorate and was making not that much money as a teacher, I couldn't afford my student loans. And so I had to go get a second job, which I did at night at the local university, Alliant International University. And I worked in the IT department. And they had just gotten a grant And part of the grant was like around retention of second language students. And so we would go and we would videotape. We would videotape professors teaching like challenging concepts, and we would put it, this was like early day iTunes U. We would upload it to iTunes U. And then students would be able to watch that lecture 4 or 5 times, slow it down at the part where they found most challenging. And that particular intervention was very effective. And so for me, as a fairly like young educator, my mind was blown. I was like, oh my gosh,
Right.
this is incredible. This is democratizing education. This is ubiquitous education. This is excitingly innovative and potentially disruptive, but also like complementary. There is something big here. And that was like the origins of me being like, okay, I think I really want to get more serious in to online education. And so actually when my superintendent at the time found out that I had like all this tech skills I had developed over a couple of years. And I'd also like won the district teacher of the year and some national awards at this point. And they brought me into the district office and I led all their online programs. And that was like what got me on the path. That was a super long answer. Sorry.
No, but I'm so glad. I love the Robin Williams story, the Oasis story. I love where your heart sits. I think it makes a lot of sense. But I am going to pull on something that you said, which was that you had a save the world complex. But here you are sitting here talking to me about the 70% of people trying to become vet techs and people getting access and the radical affordability. Don't you feel like you're saving the world?
I do. I do. I feel like we at Penn Foster Group are saving the world. I do though. Like I have been in my career. There have been times where I will like, honestly, like I would stay up at night and I would wonder, like, are we really helping people?
Well, and here's the question I have to know if you wonder is, you know, people like you, like Tom Vanderek, have been on this journey around like skills, the SM Lads, right? This online learning piece, this alternative to higher ed for a long time. You know, Tom and I were just joking about an article I found from 2013 where he'd written that like micro credentials are going to save the world, basically. Has there been a moment in the last, you know, couple of decades where you've kind of been like, maybe I'm wrong? Like maybe this isn't going to change. Maybe we can't do this.
I'm such like a fundamentally optimistic person that I don't want to concede, but yeah, I mean, listen, the last organization I was at, which I love, I have a lot of respect for, but there's a very strong, how do you want to say it? Like faculty governance culture that doesn't want to reimagine. And I get it. Like I've been there before. I mean, listen, being a professor is one of the most amazing, you know, jobs on the planet, and to be a thought leader and a researcher and to teach students every day. Like it's a great job. And at the same time, like you can kind of get honed in on your little world. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think if you're in an environment where your job is to like innovate and reimagine, and you're working with a lot of folks who want the opposite of that, it can be really challenging. So there have definitely been times where I'm like, I don't know if this thing's really gonna work. You know, I feel like the system is set up to move slow, you know, and to really push back against the waves of like change and innovation. I would say though, to the optimistic side, I feel more optimistic now than ever. And I think part of that is honestly, it's like, I think the AI revolution is here. And I think if you can use it in the right way, which is key, because listen, right, you can do bad learning faster and cheaper. Like you can do that 100%.
Right.
But I really think that we're living in a time in which increasingly students are going to demand that if they're paying for a degree, that it is actually equipping them with the skills that they need to be successful on the job. And increasingly, they're going to want that better and faster and cheaper. And so I think AI is like a key part of the ingredients that gets us there. So like, I feel like for so long to really create ubiquitous, personalized learning, we've had like part of it. I really do. I think we're at that moment, and increasingly so, where like, we're going to have the toolkit. And so I'm really optimistic right now, in spite of a lot of the challenges. That absenteeism in high school is way up. We're seeing the cost of degree to continue to like go way up. We have obviously a political climate that's not optimal. And yet I still kind of believe that we're at one of those like watershed moments. I really do.
You definitely are an optimist. But let me ask you this though. What I think I hear you saying is the stronghold that the 4-year traditional degree has had on the American public is somewhat loosening, and that AI is a part of that. Just also generally the job market is a part of that, right?
Yep.
Would you say that that's part of where your optimism comes from, is that this thing that has kind of slowed us down for so long is finally kind of releasing?
Yeah, I do. And I'll say again, like, I think there is a really important place that, call it the more traditional approach to learning, has for students. Listen, when I was 18, like, I wasn't ready to go get a job. I needed to grow up. I loved like being in some of my sociology courses of education. Those are some of my favorite, I loved it. But if you told me now I have to go back and get a degree or get a certificate, I need quick. I need, right? So yes, I do. I think we are reaching a point where, for a percentage of students, those kind of brick and mortar university environments are still very viable. But for the like larger percentage of students who often are adults, often need a job quicker, or have a job and need to upskill for that next level, who are often parents, like, yes, I think we are at a moment where we're really going to start to see major shifts in the way we approach those types of students.
Okay, I'm totally convinced. I feel like you've pitched online learning and it's working on me. Like, I'm going to go become a vet tech. What are the big barriers that you still see for like really making a huge shift, especially on the front of getting people to choose affordable and high quality online learning?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, I think one, from the perspective of the student, I still think like online learning can feel like you're all alone too often. And so if you are a super busy parent and you are working like a vet tech, like already in the space, and you come home and you finally have like a moment to study, but it's like 9:30 at night and you're exhausted and you feel like nobody's like there, like on the other side of the screen. You don't feel that like presence, the motivation that like so many of like the great teachers I'm sure that you and I had growing up like provided. Like, I think that is a key challenge. We need to figure out how to create learning experiences where students don't feel like they're all alone. And so like a big part of Penn Foster Group's like journey to double the completion is also figuring out how to more personalize a learning experience in which, yeah, sure, there's like personalized tutoring that perhaps AI powers, but then there's also like human connection and presence. Like, I think that's probably challenge number one. I think outside of Penn Foster Group, which is why sort of like, what am I most proud about? I'm proud about the LADS model. I think you have very outdated learning models. I mean, you have models that are so slow to shift from the didactic type of learning where I'm the professor, I have all the knowledge, you're the student, you're a repository, I'm going to dump all this information into your head. You're going to magically not only memorize it, but you're going to learn how to apply it in complex, changing situations. And then we're good to go. Like, that's not how real learning works. And I think there's a lot of challenge, both in traditional brick and mortar learning and online learning, to like make major shifts. And it's not rocket science. Like, we just honestly need to look at the learning sciences. There's an art to teaching and content creation, of course, but there's also a science to it. And we need to like really pay attention to the science part of it.
And do you think like most online universities are prioritizing that now? Like, one of the things you mentioned really quickly was, marketing is where a lot of the money in online learning is going. And I know that's true. I've seen some of like the HubSpot statistics on this kind of stuff. Do you think that the shift of learning science and really making the curriculum and the content better is coming, or is that not there yet? I
think I sort of see islands of excellence, if I'm just being honest. I think too much of education, especially higher education, is teaching as a solo sport. And I don't think that's the answer. I think it should be collaborative design. And, I think as a faculty member or a teacher and you're a subject matter expert, like, that's critical. Like, you are definitely part of that collaborative team, but you may not be the online learning expert.
Right.
You may not be the design expert. You may not be the learning science expert. And so we need to embrace models in which there's more collaboration to create the learning experience. I think that's one. I see islands of excellence, but I don't see it universal. And I know because one of my
Yeah.
jobs as a professor, when I first got my like first professor job, is part of it was teaching students, but part of it was helping professors put their content online. And
Okay.
that was really challenging. So I think that like that to me is probably number one in terms of like where I think like the shift needs to happen. And the second you mentioned it is like, I think people need to get really serious about reimagining the way that so much of the last like decade has been with online learning, which the majority of dollars are focused on marketing enrollment.
Right.
And you need to really balance. I get it. You got to get competitive space out there. You got to attract students. Like, it's not that there's not an investment there. It just needs to be an equal investment in the actual product you're selling.
Yeah.
Right? Which means more investment in the teaching and learning part of the experience.
Well, to your point, I think part of the reason you and I got introduced is because I talked to someone from Calbright College, and almost all of their growth, which has been huge, has been word of mouth. Like, they have done very little on marketing. They're very into the student experience, and they're so into the student experience. They're not just talking about like the learning experience. They're also talking about if, a part of their issues is that someone doesn't have benefits, they don't have the help they need. They're trying to like find ways to holistically support their learners so they can persist through the courses, because what they're finding is some of the issue isn't just the learning, isn't the algebra course. It's that the 1,000 things in life are keeping people from getting their degrees.
Yeah, so this resonates. And Shannon, right?
Shannon, exactly.
And somehow you're listening out there, Shannon. Like, so her and I worked together at National, and we had so much fun together. We would always go out and have drinks and dream up stuff. So she's a rock star.
Oh, cool.
So just as an example to double down on that. So we just did a study of our under 19 population in high school. And I say under 19 because our online high school is everything from like a 15-year-old to like a 50-year-old. So there's a range of different students, but for our under 19 population, we have a team within our product division that does research on students and research on particular points in the experience where we see friction. And so we saw for under 19, we saw like progression challenges, especially early on, and we wanted to understand why. And so this team is led by Cynthia, who's like just total awesome rock star as well. And this team dove in, and not surprisingly, they found that one of, if not the main issue, was a challenge with personal life, usually connected with family issues, right. Like basic Maslow hierarchy of needs stuff, like shelter, food, right? And then honestly, time management came up as well. But we just see that time and time again. And we shouldn't be surprised if like part of the like space that we're so passionate about serving is a population that sort of socioeconomically is not quite maybe as affluent as a certain other type. Like, we shouldn't be surprised that these kinds of needs are part of their challenge in completions. And so I love the fact that people like Calbright and honestly Penn Foster Group think a lot about how to provide services beyond just the educational experiences to make sure students stick around and complete.
Yeah, I'm sure that really resonates back to your experience. The very first job you were talking about when you were working with high school students. Often the reason high school students are unprepared, similar to students, is that there's so much else going on in life, right? I feel like there's some lovely quote, and I'm not going to get it right, but it's something like, anyone you meet is facing a bunch of challenges you know nothing about, right? And so it's true with online learning and degrees. And then we make it harder by throwing this algebra course they're never going to need that is not, pertinent to the degree they're trying to get. So I think that's really great. We're running low on time. I could do this all day with you, though. This is so interesting. I am just become like a huge Penn Foster fan, and I might become a vet tech later. But I've got 5 questions I ask everybody. And the first one I'm going to ask you, I know you're going to want it quick, but if you were to go get another degree or certification today, what would you go get it in?
Ooh. Okay. The one that like honestly pops in my head is something to do with AI literacy. Like I would love to combine like critical thinking and AI literacy and get like an actual certificate in it and go teach it. That would be a lot of fun for me right now.
Really? You don't want to become like those guys who are getting $2 million or whatever a year from Meta because they have the AI. So you just want to be good enough to teach other people about it?
I would love $100 million signing bonus. I think I'd be a terrible coder though. I'd be the AI solution that gives you a bunch of hallucinations.
I've talked a lot about degrees, but what's a lesson that you've only learned through experience?
Oh man, there's a lot. I would probably have to go with parenting.
Right.
And I would say the lesson that I've learned is going to sound like a paradox. but is this balance between like life isn't about me. And yet I need to take care of myself in order to be a great parent. So it's like this like tricky balanced paradox of sorts.
That's really lovely. I really enjoyed that. And I hadn't heard that. I was thinking of all the parent mantras I've heard, and I was like, which one is he going to pick? And I've not heard that one. That was really nice. You talk about how a lot of your learners are looking to get into new careers. What's a signal that you currently don't see on resumes that you think should be on there?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, even though Penn Foster Group in a certain programs requires externships and internships, I think increasingly folks are going to want to see examples of people being able to prove in an actual work-like environment the demonstration of those skills, especially as certain jobs become more competitive. So it's not that I don't see it, but I would even argue that we need to like double down on it. Like people need to do more like working, earning, and learning.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And I think it's getting harder and harder to find them too. So I appreciate you bringing that up. All right, what's your personal mantra?
Be great.
Between that and the believe sign, I feel so inspired. All right, and your go-to karaoke song?
Oh my gosh. So you were talking, and some people are listening to this and have actually been at conferences with me. You know I'm not lying. My CEO and I did like karaoke song recently. But so I wish it was Don't Stop Believing by Journey, but it's actually not. It's actually Wham! Wake Me Up Before You Go Go.
A much easier song to sing. People forget that Don't Stop Believing is not an easy song. So.
It's not. And I can do like the full on like 80s dance. Like I'm bringing the energy to Wham!
Well, that is so amazing. A lot of people try to pretend like they don't have a go-to song. I appreciate that you gave it to us straight. And I appreciate that that's the fact on everything we've talked about today, whether it's online learning, higher ed, the dismantling of higher ed and some of the old policies that are there, and really what all learners are facing as they try to upskill across the country. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. It's been a lot of fun.